Well, hello and welcome to Knife Delights. Well, today on the table we have a Buck 313 Muskrat. Yes, this is a viewer requested video. Howard said that he has a 313 and he wanted to know more information about this model, so I just thought I'd take the time here to pull this wonderful, beautiful, new old stock knife out. And we'll just start off here with the box. It was a brown box. Buck knives, famous for holding an edge. And then you got Muskrat, the model number. Not wanting to focus. There we go. Made in the USA. And there we go. Required for redemption. To protect your guarantee, read and follow enclosed instructions before use. So this was out before Buck came out with their forever warranty. And this is just kind of some of the paperwork that you used to get with the Buck knives. Pretty cool. Here's your registration you would have to fill out and send in. Looks something like that. Yep. Fill out and return within the next 10 days. This is your Buck Knives limited warranty and product registration card. So, yep. Warning, this knife is not designed for pounding or prying. On lock blade models, strong impacts or twisting forces may damage the lock mechanism, etc., etc. So, then it goes over the limitations of the warranties right there. You can pause this and read it if you would like. What is covered, what is not. And then, that's typical from Buck. They always put a message in. And this was back when Al Buck was still the president. No, Chuck Buck was. I've got a picture of Al Buck, who passed away March 31st, 1991. And the message is from Chuck Buck. So Chuck Buck would be the grandson. Al Buck was Hoyt Buck's son. So second generation and third generation. But we're going to be discussing why that date right there is important. Because, well, let's just get into it here. So the Muskrats were popular with fur traders. The Buck Muskrats were always contracted by Camillus. Buck never made them in-house. And it first appeared in the 1972 catalog. And it was last seen in the 1997 catalog. And the last production year was 1985. And there were 3 different versions of the Buck Muskrat 313 that was made. So why is this date important? Well, somewheres around 84 or 85, Buck started making a lot of their own slip joints. But Camillus made all of the Muskrats. But when Buck started in 86, they started adding the date symbols next to the model number. And since this was a Camillus contracted one, why there is no date symbol on it. Now, you said the last production year was 85, so why would we have this slip in here? And it is showing Al Buck being passed away in 1991. If this was made in 1985, they wouldn't put this literature in there with the knife. And I want to explain this again. It's always kind of difficult to explain. So when we're talking years, or the year a knife was made, a lot of times in my videos, I reference when it first appears in a Buck catalog and when it last appears in the Buck catalog. So again, it first appeared in 72 and last seen in the 97 catalog. So if the last production year was 85, what that means is this knife was probably made, based on this paperwork here, this was probably put together after 1985 and actually after 1991, right? So the blade was probably stamped out in maybe 1985 and the other parts were made in 85. They just didn't assemble the knife. So 85 came around. They still had a bunch of these that weren't put together yet because they weren't selling. So every year, I suppose, they, had Camillus put so many of them together and get them through that year, and they just kept doing it and kept doing it until the supplies ran out. And that's probably why it was last seen in the 97 catalog, because they had just plain, run out of the parts. I hope that's, I hope I've explained that correctly. I always try to bring this up because it always raises questions. How old is my knife? Well, how we are as humans, we want to know like the exact day and month and year of when it was made. So if you're considering when was the main blade made and stamped, that is different than when the knife is assembled, and it can also be different from when it first appears in a catalog. So if you have a 2010 catalog and that's the first time it appears, the knives were probably made in 2009 because you got to have them ready to go for the 2010 catalog. Does that make sense? Okay. So anyway, here is Buck's version of a Muskrat. Now, typically a Muskrat has 2 clip point blades. 2 of these long, slender blades like this, which is nice for cleaning fur-bearing animals, small fur-bearing animals such as muskrat, mink, possum, coon, all that other types of small animals. But Buck, for their second blade, instead of using 2 clip blades, they decided to use a spay blade, a long spay blade. Now, when I remember back when I was a kid, there was an old man that lived next door to me, and he was quite the outdoorsman, and he ran trap lines every year. And when I was a kid, on the weekends or during school Christmas vacation, he would let me go out and run the trap lines with him. And of course, I watched him do a lot of skinning. And I do know that, like with the fox and that, when you're getting around the head and kind of like doing your caping, you got to be very careful. He always said you never want to poke a hole in the hide because that devalues the hide. So using the spay blade, it's not such a point here. So doing some of your delicate work up and around the head, you'd be less likely to poke a hole in the pelt using this blade than you would with this blade. So that might be why they went ahead and put the long spay blade on here. So the Buck 313, like other versions of the Buck 300 series knives, has the slanted bolsters, black saw-cut Delrin, and it's Delrin because it was made by Camillus. Buck used, when they do their in-house knives, even to this day, they call it Velox. It's very similar to Delrin. It's got brass liners and a single steel back spring. And you've got the spring rivet here, or the center pin, and it is in brass. And then you got the traditional oval shield. Okay, as I said, there were 3 versions. And from 1972 to 1974, the model number was not on the tang on the front side of the main blade. The model number was actually on the pile side, so it had been stamped back here. Now you see this has a easy out here, or nail knock, what they call it. So it's easier to get down to your nail nick. On the original version, actually this one has it on both sides. We'll get to that. But on the original version, then you had the model number on the back, and you had this nail notch just on the back. You did not have it on the front, just on the back. And again, these were made from 72 to 74. Now, version 2 and version 3 are very similar. They're both listed as being made from 1974 to 1985, or, as I explained earlier, assembled up until, 1997 or something. But on version 2 and 3, you've got the model number actually on the main blade on the tang stamp as part of the tang stamp, and there's no stampings on the pile side of either blade. So the 2 versions were, if I just kind of covered that up there, you would see that the nail nick moved from the back, from the pile side over here to the show side, and you had a single one here on front. And then the third version is all the same information, except that they added the easy open there on the front, and it has it on the back both. And it's listed that these were made from 74 to 85 also, which probably means that, well, I got this information from the Buck Collectors Club, so they're probably not able to distinguish between 74 and 85, you know, when they went from the single one up front to the double ones here. Well, Howard, I hope this gives you the information that you were looking for on this wonderful pattern. I just love this knife. Again, I love the fact it's new old stock. I got this from a gentleman that had bought out some remaining stock from a hardware store. So that's how I was able to come across this wonderful, wonderful knife. Well, folks, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing, and leave me a comment. And until next time, have a very delightful day.